Is this thing on? Yeah. Let's see if I can figure out how this thing works as well. Hey everybody, I'm Matt Biilmann from Netlify, and I'm going to talk today about the rise of the Jamstack. I had this presentation I did a year ago at Smashing Magazine, and then I had today planned, and I had the busiest week ever, the last 7 days. So I had this conundrum: should I take my presentation from last year and then just give it again, true and tried, or should I sit down last night at 1 a.m. and make a new one? And whenever there's like a safe choice and another choice, I probably have a tendency to not so often go for the safe choice. So here's a brand new presentation for you. So I'm Matt Biilmann. I'll start by just telling a little bit about myself and where I got to this whole Jamstack approach from. I'm the CEO of Netlify, and Netlify, as hopefully some of you know, is a publishing platform for the modern web. We take it from when you push to Git to when your site is live on a globally distributed content delivery network. We handle the whole continuous deployment process, and we try to build everything that it takes to make this new stack a viable way of building large production quality websites or personal blogs or anything you want, right? But to really make it a solid alternative to the way we've been building websites for a very long time, way too long. So to talk a little bit about building websites for a long time and where I came from, Netlify is based here in San Francisco, but before I got here, I spent 7 years in Spain, in Madrid, where I worked as a CTO for a company that built websites for small to medium businesses, and we built a lot of websites. So we built around 100 websites a week and tens of thousands of sites in total. Had like freelance designers doing the actual design work, and then in-house we built the whole platform that the designers would use to do the design with, that the clients would use to do the content manage with, and that ran this whole process from when a brief came in till a production quality website came out in the other end, and the hosting and everything. We had 2 generations of CMSs we developed in-house and so on. So we got to know a lot about what it means to build sites at a large scale and at a large variety. And then I started a company called Webpop, based on taking the experience of building building that platform and then trying to build a fully hosted content management system that other agencies, other professionals could use to get some of the same efficiencies in their workflows. I moved to the Bay Area with my startup, like so many others, and started working on this project. But one of the things that happened while I was working on that was that in the middle of it, front-end development just completely changed. When I started Webpop, the number one feature request without any comparison was FTP access. and today it's barely a thing, right? Like Git became a massive phenomenon, not just for version control, but also as the main way that we as developers collaborate and communicate and publish. And I mean, how many here used to, in their professional life, work by FTPing into some production server and changing stuff? It's a solid amount. How many people do that today? There's one that almost admitted it over there, but it was like a huge change in the workflow, right? At the same time, browsers became incredibly more powerful. They went from being simple document viewers to actually being application runtimes, and we started having this whole API economy with microservices and different kind of services that you talk to directly from the browser. And obviously, modern JavaScript, and especially the whole world of front-end build tools, post-processors, pre-processors, all kinds of processes, exploded and completely changed how the daily workflow of any front-end developer looks like. So what I was seeing was that I was building a platform for a legacy stack, essentially, right? For the last 15 years, the way we've been building sites has been building them on the fly anytime a request comes in, right? So this is the way, like, this is the model of WordPress, of Rails, of Drupal, or of Webpub, where we have like a typical stack that runs all the stuff we need every time a client comes in and makes a request. And that has led to huge issues around security. Everybody probably knows these stats, right? But a fun example is that at Netlify, we get around 60 million requests every month, starting with WP admin, even though you cannot put a WordPress site on Netlify, right? And it's just from crawlers and automated malware looking for holes in WordPress and just automatically infecting, right? I think by now it's safe to say that if you take any normal WordPress site with a few plugins, you put it on a host, and then you don't update it, the time it will take from you put it live and until something bad happens to it is probably down to 11 days or something like that, right? Performance has become a huge issue. Also because of mobile. People are insanely impatient when they try to load something on their phone and they don't have multitasking and things like that. And everybody have seen all the analysis from Google, from Amazon around how much performance can impact conversion rates and so on. And inherently, when you have to have some origin in a specific place of the world that runs your whole thing every time someone comes in, your performance suffers, right? Scalability is another issue. The web has gotten a lot bigger than it was a while ago. And that means that when something suddenly gets popular, it can get very popular. And if you have to run a program every time something comes into something popular, things tend to blow up, and we keep, like everybody knows it, going to Hacker News, seeing a popular link and clicking through just to get a database error. So what we are like, the reason we're here and talking about Jamstack is that we believe that there's like a shift happening in the architecture of the web. And if we go way back to before the web, we had this relatively simple client-server model of Unix systems, where you would run a fairly heavy client locally, you would connect to some workstation, like some big mainframe or the like, and get your allotted slot, and you would work, and there would be this very clean client-server model. Then, as we moved into the modern web, or sort of to the initial phase of the web, and build out Web 2.0 and all of that, we started building out this model where instead we had like a client that's the browser talking to a web server that would talk to an app server that would talk to a database, and then to actually make it work, we would need to start introducing all these layers of caching between each of those different elements, memcached running and so on. And what we're starting to see now is a switch from that approach to a model that's not client-server, but client services, where we start fragmenting the instead of having this monolithic origin, we're starting to be able to take the main application, distribute it directly all over the world on a content delivery network, and then talk straight from the browser to lots of different small services. And that's something we think that will lead to a fairly big change in how we build websites and how we think about web platforms. Basically a new stack, right, where you pre-build as much as you can through build tools. You decouple the front end and the back end completely. You integrate very closely with this Git-driven workflow that we're all starting to work with it's just happened, right? Like, it's become the main way we work as developers. We check in, we create pull requests, we create branches. So the logical step is to hook that up to a continuous delivery process, and every time we work in Git, it just reflected in this automated build process and pushed to a content delivery all over the world. And then we'll see this economy of all these small microservices, where some of them will be things we build ourselves, some of them will be managed services by other people, and some of them will be traditional larger APIs and so on, but there'll be a large variety at it. And if we do this right, we can get a web that will be many, many times faster, that will really deal at a much more profound level with the issues of malware, and that will, out of the box, be easy to handle essentially any amount of traffic you can throw at it. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the Jamstack. And the Jamstack came about as a way to put some nomenclature on this, because we saw that there were so many things happening in this space. Like Git was happening, the API economy was happening, static site generators were exploding, and some people were talking about static, some people were talking about progressive web apps, some people were talking about single page apps, and we saw there was a certain convergence of all of these terms under like a larger architectural shift and not a specific technological shift. And what we started to talk about was this fundamental trinity of JavaScript, APIs, and markup, where we end up with a web architecture where we pre-built markup that gets shipped all over the world to distribute it, where we use JavaScript as the main runtime in the browser, in the client, and talk to all these different services for all the dynamic functionalities we need. So this is not going to be a super long presentation, but I want to just put something concrete on the architectural talk as well. So how many here have seen the new version of Smashing Magazine? Quite a few. So Smashing Magazine, how many know Smashing Magazine? That's a lot. So Smashing Magazine is probably the largest digital publication for front-end developers and so on. And they came to me after I gave my talk last year, the one I decided not to just give you guys today, and asked me, so if we took Smashing Magazine and we wanted to build it with this new stack, how would that look like? Like, how would that actually be doable? And Smashing Magazine at the time, and still in the current version, but that's changing soon, and I'll tell more about that. But at the time, Smashing Magazine was not like a simple, basic website, right? Like they've been running for more than 10 years. They have thousands of articles. They have a WordPress site with around 200,000 comments. They do a lot of their monetization by selling ebooks and print books and conference tickets. So they have a Shopify shop that does that. They have a job board that's an old Rails application running apart from those. And then they have their conferences where they have a conference site made in Kirby. And each of these are like traditional big monolithic chunks you can't really combine. So Smashing Magazine had to maintain the same theme in WordPress, in Shopify, in Rails, and some modification of it in Kirby. Different template languages, different post processors, and so on. And when they came to us, on the one hand, they were planning a major redesign of the site. Imagine having to do this across all these platforms. And on the other hand, they wanted to introduce a concept of memberships. And when you have all these different platforms, where would that even live, right? Like there's no way these platforms can really talk to each other or coexist or just be composed. You just have part of your site lives here, part of your site lives here. So if you want some kind of cross-cutting membership concern, how do you even approach that? So we started talking to them about like how would it look like if you were to build it with this new approach, with a pre-built front end, with all the content directly on a content delivery network, and then small services for the different functionalities they needed. And we started looking at the ecosystem around the Jamstack and see what's out there. And we could see that at the time there wasn't like an easy way we could just go to them and say, yeah, sure, you should just use that and that and that, and then you're all set. Go build it and we'll have a look when it's ready. Instead, we saw that we would have to do a lot of work to help them kickstart that whole ecosystem and say, like, these are the things that we need. And from my background, building both Webpop and building tens of thousands of websites in Spain, one of the things I could see when I talked with them is that for building like the vast majority of websites, there's like 5 or 6 core services you need in reality. So there's all kinds of other services that comes in handy and are useful and so on, but there's like a set of content management, authentication, e-commerce, memberships, comments, and form processing. And if you sort of have those covered, that will allow you to build the vast majority of websites. So we, as a small startup, we again, I mentioned something about taking the safe way or sometimes taking another way. We said, sure, let's build all of those. So we launched a whole series of open source projects that you can find on netlify.com/open source. Most important, probably Netlify CMS. So the new architecture of Smashing Magazine looks something like this. And you can all check it out at next.smashingmagazine.com. It's in public beta right now, and I think they'll soon announce the release date for the whole thing. When you visit the whole next.smashingmagazine.com site with e-commerce and everything involved, there's no runtime involved. It's all distributed on a content delivery network. Even when you go to the checkout of the shop, or when you browse the books, or when you look at the job board or anything, it's all pre-built and pushed out. One of the first of these open source projects was Victor Hugo. So there's a static site generator called Hugo, written in Go, that's become very popular because it has incredibly fast build times. So we built a boilerplate around that called Victor Hugo, a boilerplate for epic websites, and made it open source and kickstarted the Smashing project with that. It's basically just Hugo plus a modern asset pipeline. Then we have the piece called Netlify CMS. So Netlify CMS is a single page app made in React. It's completely agnostic to what build tool you use. So it doesn't care if you use Jekyll or Hugo or Middleman or Hixo or Mitchell-Smith or your own concoction or whatever. The only thing it cares about is editing structured data that's persisted in a Git repository. You typically pull it into the site. It's actually editing. So in the Smashing case, it's just under the /admin path, just as if it was a /vp admin, but instead of being some server-side thing that runs, it's just a React application that essentially talks to GitHub's data API. Now, what this means is that all the content editors, marketing coordinators, whoever it is, gets a really simple UI for going in and editing content, writing new articles, and so on. But when they hit save, instead of making a query to an update to some database somewhere, creates a new branch with a new file in GitHub. It creates a pull request. It's an editorial workflow where the people can go in and say, what are the stages here, move from draft to publish. And once a content editor goes in and hits publish, we merge that pull request into master and the new version goes live. And the way specifically it's hooked up with Netlify, we'll build all those pull requests and branches and so on, so everything can be previewed at every time. But even with the CMS itself, we build in a client-side live preview of what the final content will look like when you publish it. So you have like a left-right experience where content editors can always see, once I hit save, what is it actually I'm going to publish. Of course, again, we know there'll be some delay in a build time and a deployment function, so this was really important for us to give this sense of like immediacy to the content editors. So that's Netlify CMS. It's an open source project. It's not tied to our platform in any way, though we think you should absolutely use it together with our platform. And we hope it will be really a useful addition to the whole community and make it possible to start working towards a standard for content editing in this new stack. One of the other APIs we we made open source in this process. That's also a really interesting example of how this architecture work is how did we solve e-commerce? Because obviously before this, Smashing Magazine had a whole Shopify site just because they needed to sell stuff. And they had they have several kinds of products they're selling, both physical and digital. They have to have tax calculations for different types of products, even some complexities like bundled products where you have an ebook and a print book together and they have different tax rules in some countries and so on. They also, obviously Smashing Magazine, they're all about UX, UI, front-end development, so they also really had this urge to dive deep and being able to completely customize their checkout flows and the shopping experience. So we made an open source API called GoCommerce, and it's a true microservice in a way. Like if you were to build an e-commerce with the traditional stack, it would have to be a huge monolithic app, and you would have to solve like all these issues around how does routing work in that app? What is a page? How do you do content management in that app? You have to implement a product database and a user database and the whole like all of this and the whole engine for driving an e-commerce website. In contrast, GoCommerce, it's exaggerated, but in its essence, it comes down to two API endpoints. One that's create an order, and one that's create a payment. So it has no product database, it has no user database, and the way it works is that when in Smashing case, when you put a book in your shopping cart, that's managed in local storage, it's handled locally in your browser, right? And everything is done client-side with Preact components. When you go to the checkout component is made in Preact and just takes you through the different steps, filling out all your information. Then when you click confirm, the client sends a simple API call saying, here are the line items that we want to create an order for. Each line item is just a path. And then what GoCommerce does in the background is that it will look up each of those paths on the website. It will look for some GoCommerce specific metadata that tells GoCommerce what's the price, what's the product type, is there any special tax calculations or discounts that should apply. We'll calculate all the pricing in GoCommerce and send back an order object. And then you can use any of these modern services like Stripe or PayPal to create a payment token and then send GoCommerce another command saying, here's a payment token for this order, and GoCommerce will create the payment and send out the email confirmation and all of that, and now you've sold the product, right? And the interesting thing again is that there's no product database. All the products just lives on the website. So that also means that all the products are just stored in a Git repository. They're edited with Netlify CMS like anything else. They're under version control. If you want to edit a product and see what it looks like in context, you just do a pull request and see it, and so on, right? But in Smashing's case, they were able to completely customize the checkout flow and create 3 different checkout flows. A different one for tickets, where you need to gather attendee information and so on. A different one for the job board, where you need to fill in what do I actually want to post to the job board and so on, and make that work. Or with a very small service, where with the traditional stack you would have had to have this completely different monolithic service, and this make it truly composable. I don't have a lot of time to talk about how we tie these services together, but the trick for users is a small, like we made a small API called GoThrough, which is just a simple service for user registration, sign-ups, login, also completely open source, available for anybody, and it issues JSON Web Tokens. But the idea is that any of these small microservices we've built for this is aware of the concept of JSON Web Tokens. And JSON Web Tokens is a way of doing cryptographically safe, stateless user authentication. So it's a way for the front end to be able to tell GoCommerce, now I made this order, I sent this request saying I'm buying these items, and I'm doing it on behalf of someone that has this user ID. Then GoCommerce can keep track of this user ID without having to have its own user database or anything, and you can later look it up in its APIs. So an important concept of how JSON Web Tokens is also starting to enable us to compose all these small different services and swap them in and out as we want, or use some in one project and some in another project, and hopefully start building up this ecosystem around a new front-end stack. Smashing also had 200,000 comments, so we built a small open source project called GoTell that will essentially act as a static API for comments. Every time you post a new comment, it actually creates a little commit in GitHub that triggers a build of the comment side, and then you just have a JSON file for each thread, and it lives directly on the CDN, so it's like very fast in terms of load time to fetch those client side, and again, there's no runtime involved when all of those comments are served. It's completely static. So that was a bit about like the open source ecosystem, and from our part, this is just a way of trying to kickstart it, right? Like this is just a way of going out and saying, hey, we think all of these things should exist. We think they should be open. We think this should be a standard based around an open web architecture where everybody can contribute. And we hope many others will join us in building these kind of services and expand this ecosystem. So that's what we are talking about when we're talking about the Jamstack. And it is this vision for how we can move towards a much better web architecture, how we can fundamentally solve these issues around performance, security, reliability, and scalability that's been ever increasing the last 15 years. Just end with some of the best practices that you can read on more in depth at jamstack.org. One of the huge advantages with building things with this approach is that you can get away from the concept of having a single origin. So if you take a WordPress site, no matter how many caching plugins you use and so on, you're still running that server somewhere specifically, and you still have that single point of failure, and you still have that round trip. That means that if that server is in New York, people from New York might get fast load times, but no matter how much you optimize things, people in Tokyo will probably have to wait at least a second just before they see the initial HTML, right? So if you're building with this approach, you need to take advantage of it by actually distributing your front end all over the world. Like everything lives in Git. Like the whole point of this that started this for me was this switch from an old workflow and to a completely Git-centric workflow. So I think it's important that we should think about like how can we build on top of that? How can we take these workflows we're already using as developers and expand on those and making them more powerful? Modern build tools have come in, like the whole smashing side would not have been possible if it wasn't for a build tool like Hugo that's capable of taking all of those thousands of articles and build out the whole smashing front end in around 13 seconds. That's a huge step up for where we were some years ago. Obviously, automated builds like this should not be something where the individual developer have to run those build tools locally and then push them somewhere. You should just be able to rely on that whenever you update, whenever you work in your Git flow, there's just some system that will pick up what you do and build your tool. Same with deploys, they should just happen, right? Like when you make a pull request, you should expect it to just go live somewhere and you can see it. When you make a branch, you should expect it to just live somewhere where it gets updated wherever you push to it. The last thing is instant cache invalidation. If you do use a content delivery network, make sure that doesn't mean that now that you give up on actually being able to change things, right? Like some people put things on a content delivery network and suddenly they have 1 hour expiration times on all of the HTML files, and every time a content editor makes a mistake and pushes it live, it's going to be live for an hour. And apart from that, it ruins sort of the concept of being able to do atomic deploys because those cache times are not necessarily coherent across your site. So if you push out a major change, every time you do that, you might have certain amount of time where the site is just in an inconsistent state, and we should not expect that to ever be the case. So that was a bit about the Jamstack, about the work we've been doing to try to build out an ecosystem around it. I hope you'll all let us know what you think about this approach. Hopefully contribute to the open source projects that we're making, and keep the conversation going. So thank you.